Everyone. Oh, hi, everyone. How are we? It's on. Can you hear me? How's everybody? Great. Let's see if we can get through this without the alarms going off, shall we? Okay. It's on. Is it loud enough? Wait, hold on. Before you do that, Jason, don't do that yet. What about this one? What about now? Is that better? Slightly better? How about now? Better, 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 better? Better? All right. Okay, so I appreciate everybody being here. I know that today at 1:30 was supposed to be a training session on the new portal that we have on the website, which we will reschedule for next week or the week after. So stay tuned on your calendar for that. But I figured since we had the time on the calendar and we had an opportunity to get everyone together, we would do a little bit of a debriefing on yesterday's emergency exercise. And we'll make this super long, but we wanted to just give you a little bit of an opportunity to hear what we discussed at a meeting that we just had, which we called a hot wash, which is basically just a meeting where we got together, we went around the room and talked about our observations as a team, and then get some of your feedback. We're not going to make this, as I said, extensively long. But maybe if I could just have Cameron come up and talk for 6 minutes or less about the planning process and then what the scenario was. Now it's down to 5 minutes because you two are sitting over there talking. Well, all right. So let me actually, while they keep talking over there, let me just explain to you the impetus for all of this, okay? And then I'll have Cameron talk about the planning process and then what actually the scenario was yesterday, so you know in detail what happened. In October of 2022, because I checked my calendar, October 22nd of 2022 to be precise, we actually held an active shooter drill on this campus, which was the second active shooter drill that we had held. We held it with just the New Paltz Police Department. And we collectively did a very lousy job. It was a good second effort, but it wasn't that great. And we knew that we wanted to build off of it. And when we broke from that meeting, I sort of tongue in cheek had said to the chief of the New Paltz Police Department, hey, if you guys ever thought it would be a good idea to do a multi-agency county-wide drill with all of the first responders in Ulster County to really test something, you guys could do it at Woodland Pond. And for those of you that have said, and I heard that, there were people yesterday saying, what was Michelle thinking? The reason that I thought of that was because I don't know how many of you know this or not, but so my husband just retired. Well, not just, but he'd retired from law enforcement in May of last year. Okay. He was he started actually his career in New Paltz as part-time cop. And then as his career progressed, he was the first school resource officer, which is cop in the school in Saugerties. He eventually was on the emergency services unit, which is the SWAT team in Ulster County when the mall shooting happened. Okay. So there was a mall shooting at Best Buy in the Hudson Valley Mall. He was one of the first cops that responded at that. He was a detective for the town of Ulster, then a sergeant, then retired as a lieutenant. He is a active member of the Glasgow Fire Department, and he's on their FAST team, which is the cops that go into fires to save firefighters that go in to save other firefighters when they go down. Okay. What struck me was he's always told me that training is incredibly important in emergency situations, and it becomes muscle memory. you know? And if you don't have an opportunity to train, you won't remember it. And whether you realize it or not, you have learned an enormous amount through our drills and through our meetings. And as annoying as it's all been, and I know it's been annoying, and I know you're questioning all this, but I am so proud of all of you. You guys have learned a ton in the last year. You've learned a lot. And you know, if you hear this lockdown, or you hear it's an active shooter, or it's a lockdown, you've learned, you may not realize it, but even if you've learned one thing, you know, and my husband always say, when the shit hits the fan, it all goes out the window, but it doesn't all go out the window. Okay. Something sticks with you, even if it's close the doors and shut off the lights. That will save a life. Okay. But what happened here yesterday with all those agencies, we had over 65 or 70 emergency personnel from state police, and Cameron will get to all those details. They have not had an exercise where all of those agencies have been able to get together like that ever in Ulster County, well since before that mall shooting, to practice. And that mall shooting happened 20 years ago. And it may not seem like it's important to be able to do things like that, but I will tell you that based on the pitfalls that happened when they were training yesterday, they learned a lot, and we learned a lot. So if they learned something and no collateral damage happened, then we all learned something, and we're all better for it, in my opinion. So I appreciate everybody's participation. I appreciate your faith in us, but I do think that we're better for the training. And I do think that it raises the bar in terms of safety. So Cam, do you want to talk a little bit about what the process was for the planning, and what the actual scenario was? You now have 5 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Where to start? So we've been planning this for over a year. Last October was when we did that emergency active shooter simulation. And before that, we had started working with New Paltz Police Department to try and get some things started. And throughout this is when, you know, we kind of were trying to wrinkle out the specifics as to if Woodland Pond was the right place to have an emergency exercise that we had yesterday. So ultimately, throughout the past year, after we had that exercise, the active shooter exercise, is when we said, all right, let's do it. There were a lot of different ways that we could have went with it. A lot of my instinct relied on what the emergency personnel wanted to do, with keeping reservations of our population and nature of our community in mind. So basically, I, myself, and Rob worked very closely with the Ulster County Department of Emergency Services. And then along with that, we kind of tagged people in as necessary. So that included the New Paltz Police Department, New Paltz Fire Department, Ulster County Department of Corrective Services, Ulster County Office of Emergency Management, New York State Police, emergency EMS down the street, rather, a whole bunch of different agencies that got involved at first and then dropped off and then came back and, you know, decided if it was necessary for them to be here yesterday or not. So with that being said, basically what we ended up with was pretty much what happened yesterday. And what that was initially was a domestic violence outbreak. So to go through it with you specifically, was we had ultimately 2 actors who started the scenario. So the first one was that we had a staff member, which some of you may or may not seen. We had a staff member who was vacuuming in the main dining room. She was dressed head to toe. Nobody probably noticed that she was an actor. Looked like some that we have. And she was vacuuming. We had the other actor, who actually is the lead negotiator for Ulster County, so it worked out well. He came in, parked his motorcycle at the front door, very loud with his loud music and loud engine, I suppose, and stormed right through concierge as he proceeded through concierge, he went down to the pub area, was looking for this woman who was the housekeeper, who actually was his ex-girlfriend. The ex-girlfriend broke up with him because he was cheating on his wife with her, and he was trying to get revenge. So he came and basically took her by the arm, became violent with her, which was physical and verbal, and basically drug her out from the middle of the main dining room and back towards the outdoor near the south wing. Luckily, Tom was there to escort him. However, basically what happened was he then proceeded through the south wing, past my office, and upstairs up to the guest suite, which technically was where he was trying to find revenge. There is where he held her hostage. So from there, that is what would have stimulated a lockdown. He was basically trying to keep her there. And at that time, there was nothing known of additional threat besides him just taking her. We threw a few injects in there that would have naturally occurred, but basically we threw an inject, which is what it's called, to say that he had a gun. So that's when it became an active shooter scenario. So technically it started as a domestic, and then it moved to an active shooter scenario. So he was holding her hostage with a gun. After that point, which is probably when all of you were wondering what the heck was going on, the negotiations, excuse me, were going on between the New Paltz Police Department, Ulster County Department of Emergency Services and Police Department, and the state troopers. So they were negotiating with him basically to get him to come out of the room. And then the scenario ended up happening, ended up with a final gunshot, which was him taking his own life. She exited, and then obviously the SWAT team barricaded right in, and then the scenario is pretty much done. A few points that are major highlights is all of law enforcement communication with Woodland Pond and with each other, trying to locate the guest suite because it's impossible to find when you're not from Woodland Pond, or even if you are. And even just kind of navigating through Woodland Pond, because a major task of the SWAT team was to make sure that the facility was all clear, which is eventually what was allowed to release everybody. So while it might not have seemed that you saw a lot of action, everything that was taken place by law enforcement, by Woodland Pond, by you all, allowed law enforcement and allowed us to practice what we currently have in place, and what we hope to have in place. So that was pretty much the bones of the way that this operated. There was a lot of back and forth as to how we wanted it to play out, because trust me, there's a lot of different scenarios, but that's what we ended with.
Okay, so let's take a few questions, 5 questions about the scenario itself or the planning.
Did the actual burnt food and independent living cause a problem for the drill? Because I imagine the fire department had to come.
Okay, so Ronnie's question was, did the burnt food cause a problem? So luckily, well, I would say in independent living, not so much. Luckily, we were able to clear it just in the nick of time. So what actually happened, and actually maybe Tom, you can talk to this a little bit, and specifically about how the smoke almost disallowed us to re-engage the fire alarm system, maybe.
Yeah, a resident cooking burnt food, and it created a lot of smoke in their apartment. And at some point, the door, like if there's smoke in your apartment, we'll hear it at concierge. But when they open the door to the hallway, that's when the smoke comes out into the hallway and trips the fire alarm. We couldn't reset the fire alarm for a while because we had to get that smoke out of the hallway first. Otherwise, the same smoke that caused the alarm is still there. So we got to get that smoke out and then reset the alarm. Luckily, the fire department came by real quick because they were all ready. And they came in and they set their fans up in addition to our fans. So we were able to clear that hallway faster than we normally could have which will let us reset the alarm quicker to get ready for the scenario. So it all worked out. The thing to do is don't burn stuff on the stove. And if you do, keep your door closed. That's the best we can tell you.
Lionel, the second question.
If this was a real incident and there was a fire, would the smoke, would the fire department be allowed in, or would they have to keep a distance?
That's my belief, and I only know this from watching a lot of television, that the fire department would, of course, be coming in to handle whatever the fire situation is. Correct.
Annette.
The other thing, Lionel, is in an emergency event like that, which is something that we had set up and every event realistically should have set up, there's an incident command post. So if there's multiple different scenarios going on within an emergency, there would be the head of fire, there would be the head of police, there would be the head of Woodland Pond, and all of the different players, so to speak, in the event, no matter what's going on, to be in that incident command post and basically call the shots for their designees and others.
Actually, I just wanted to make a comment. This thing for me personally and for many people was a big pain in the neck, et cetera, et cetera. Although I cooperated and things were all closed and, but I think we should really be glad that we had a chance to work with these protective forces and to be of use to them, because they are here so often, all the time. And I don't know that they even get paid for many of their trips. If they don't go to the hospital or whatever, I'm not sure. But I think that we can be glad we had a chance to at least do something that was useful for them.
And I would second that.
And I know a lot of people are kind of saying, this is more for law enforcement. I understand that. But at the same time, all of this time that we've been taking to build up to it is prepping everybody here. So while you might have been in your apartment or your friend's apartment or in the kitchen and you were sitting there, it doesn't mean that you weren't involved and you weren't learning something. Everything leading up to yesterday was a whole world of a difference than what would have happened if we didn't prepare.
And they absolutely learned things yesterday. So for example, yesterday they, you have multi-agencies, right? One of the things that we learned and we saw firsthand was you think that it would be very clear that when multiple agencies show up, they know very clearly who's going to be in charge when multiple agencies show up. That was not the case. And they also found that the mobile command center that they intended to use as their, incident command center, their generator didn't work. So they could not utilize it. And that's real. That was not a scenario. The generator would not run. So they took over Christie's office. So when the negotiations were happening, they kicked, Christie's, well, they actually did the incident command in our back office, but when they were actually doing the negotiation with the hostage taker, that all happened in Christie's office. So they were all sitting in there, and that's not what they were planning. That was not part of the scenario. The communication system that state police plus New Paltz plus sheriff's office, they thought they were all going to be able to go on to channel whatever of their individual radios and talk to one another. That didn't initially work. So these are scenarios that they're working through and they will take back. Next Thursday here on campus, we're going to do the hot wash that we did today internally with those groups as well, with the county managers as well, to talk about what they have found and what they're going to work on within their departments. Another thing that we noticed and was really evident to a lot of us was, and you're probably understanding this and realizing this, the local police forces are really in a big sort of phase of turnover right now, right? A lot of the longtime local law enforcement are retiring. And the faces that you're seeing are young, really young. There were a lot of fresh faces here yesterday. And even though, we had a lot of jitters, especially I had a lot of jitters yesterday. There were a lot of jitters here yesterday and you could see it. So if they get opportunities to train and kind of get some of their nerves out in a safe and controlled setting, and we can be that opportunity for them, I feel like that's a gift that we can give to them. in a safe setting. Okay, I think that was question number 3. Who else has a question about either the planning or the scenario for Cameron or me? Maddie, and then we'll go to George.
Was struck by the fact that they couldn't find the headquarters. Have we ever considered having the signage looked at and redone? Because I don't know about you, but I always have to ask directions to go to anybody in the main building.
So certainly, definitely, I mean, for 461, it's not on the wayfinding signs at all. But definitely we wrote down a list of things. They had a very hard time finding 461. The fact that 461 is actually the second floor up from the main floor is an issue. So, these are definitely issues that came up yesterday. They had a very hard time finding the guest suite. So in the event of an emergency, it delayed them finding it, just based on the signs. So yes, all of these things are things that come out. So how can we help emergency responders? Do you want to respond to that at all, or just say that it's on our list? Yes, Maddie, the fact that the signs, yes, we have wayfinding signs that tell you it's this way, but 461 is not on any of them, on the guest suite. So yes, would you like to say that louder? This is one of our trusted agents, Rob. Does anyone know Rob, Don?
Nice. And that's why we chose that area, because we knew that we had some issues with that. The police coming in here, a lot of times the EMS comes in, they go to the front desk, somebody takes them up there. We knew in this scenario that wasn't going to happen. So we knew that we wanted to make it more challenging for them. As large as this campus is, like how many of you in this room know where the guest room is? Right, it's about half of you. So can you imagine what a young law enforcement person coming into the building this size, trying to find a room that's not identified? The stress that they must have felt and everything they went through that. Right, we knew that too. We knew Tom didn't take care of that ahead of time. Right. We were aware, but that was part of the planning and why we chose that particular area. It's anybody. Correct. Yep.
One of the other things too, we talked about this in the hot wash, I offered to take the officers. Okay. I was happy to go with them, escort, put myself in danger and go with them. They didn't know what the answer to that question was. They didn't know if they were allowed to take me. So these are questions they now, as their own, protocols within their departments, go back to their departments and say, what do I do in that scenario? Do I put this other civilian at risk to then, she's willing to come with me. She's one of the people that works here. What do I do? Now, Everett Erickson, who is the head of Ulster County Office of Emergency Management, said in our meeting today, the normal protocol for most local police departments and state police would be, yes, you take her, you put her behind you, like you go first with your gun, and your tactical gear on, you put her like tight behind you and you let her show you where it is. None of them said yes. Again, maybe that's the youth. And then, that kind of thing. Jean, did you? Jean, did you have a question?
No, I just want to make a comment, really. I thought the dining committee did a great job. They were there, they were circulating around and making sure people who needed a seat got a seat or switched with somebody, as well as they were on their toes there servicing us with water as needed and support. And Amy was there and Tanya. And that was just in my little area that I observed. But I know there were a lot of other people in another area someplace, but I thought that they were very good. They really helped us out, gave us support, gave us what we needed when we needed it. If we had to get out, they helped us with that. So that's all I'd like to say, but I recommend the dining committee for a star, 5 stars, 5 stars.
Yeah, well, we can talk a little bit about the response in a few minutes, but let's see. Did anybody else have questions about the planning or the scenario? Larry?
Thank you. So far, what I've heard seems to apply mainly to IL. I happen to be, for the time being, a resident in assisted living, and I can say that for many residents over there, the coincidence of the unplanned for fire alarm caused some confusion as to whether that was part of the drill or not. And we did not get a whole lot of clarification from the folks that are nominally in charge over there. So that's something that needs to be looked into.
Yeah, so that's a really great point. That's a great example of something that, you know, we can strive for and that we can grow from something like this, which again is exactly what we're here to do. We purposely barricaded the scenario here in independent living due to the nature of a lot of residents that we have in the health center to avoid disrupting their day to day. And also to prevent from the spread of COVID since we're on precautions over there. But just so you know, I mean, those little things like you just mentioned are things that we're trying to compile, and we are compiling to then, you know, move forward and become better together.
Couple more questions on the planning, George, and then Joe.
I'll be brief because I have the same comment that Maddie had about how to find the guest office. This is a very complicated place. I for one, when I moved in, took me weeks to find out that, you know, that the third floor was the main floor. I mean, you know, come on, this is really difficult. So shouldn't we be offering up special instructions to all of the other emergency groups about how this place is designed so that they know ahead of time where I mean, maybe this is what you plan to do, but that seems to be a rather obvious next step.
Just so you're aware, a few years ago, we started working with the local municipality emergency agencies, developing an emergency plan manual. And at concierge and at reception are our red emergency binders. And in there are the plans and everything else that they requested. So even yesterday, like when they came in, it was very easy for them to get that plan. And they had those plans in their hands right away. So, and there were some comments that, you know, they were pretty happy about that. That was better than most places. In the plans, we realized yesterday, we didn't have, oh, here's 461. But part of the reason they went to that room was because some people knew that when they picked out 461. So it's you know, like a lot of things you're going to talk about today in the next few weeks. There are things that, yeah, we do have to do. And just like all the communication thing about, well, I didn't hear so-and-so for a few minutes, or I didn't get a lot of information. 3-4 years ago, when we started this, there were people that were saying we had a drill. We didn't even hear that. So we moved from people not even hearing to now where we still need to get better so everybody hears quicker. But we've made amazing progress, you know, in that time frame since we started doing this. So, but, you know, so one of the things we will do ASAP, and we have a list of things to do, is I'm going to make sure on the plans that are in the emergency plans that we put 461. So, you know, it's bit by bit.
I have two questions. Within 10 or 20 minutes, everything was upstairs. What happened to the other 65 people, emergency people who were here? What were they doing in the next 2.5, 3 hours?
Yeah, a lot.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll talk about the scenario itself after we take any more questions about the planning. We'll talk about what happened in a minute, but any other questions on the planning part? Ronnie Sue?
Quick question. How did the people get into the guest suite? Isn't it always locked? And why isn't it locked?
Well, since Cam and I had this, we knew where it was going to be staged. We opened it. But in reality, if it was a staff member, just say, what if it had been Julie or Nicole and he grabbed them? and they had the guest room key. You know what I mean? It could have been any of that. So we tried to play as realistic as possible without being ridiculous. So, but yes, it is always locked, you know, so nobody can just access it as a whim. It's on either the great grandmaster or its own key. So it's not like your key's working it either. So, but we planned it that way ahead of time.
Okay, one more question on planning, and then we're going to move into what happened after the planning.
My question is, with all the problems that didn't work perfectly, is there pressure to repeat this in a year or so?
We haven't gotten that far yet, but yes, I mean, there could be, yes. One other thing I just wanted to mention, it didn't come up, but I will just answer this if anybody's wondering. One of the steps that happened before anybody assembled on campus, all of the participants staged at the fire department and had lunch. And then all of the law enforcement members went to the police department to check their ammunition. There was no live ammunition on this campus yesterday. They had to leave all live rounds and have their weapons checked did they leave the weapons? Okay. So if you had happened to see any weapons yesterday, they were fake. They were blue, like long rifles. They were not real. So they all had to leave and have that checked. So there was a whole safety check that happened at the police department yesterday. And that's normal protocol. All right. So let's fast forward a little bit. So once the perpetrator came through the building, the folks that were at concierge, Tom radioed, because Tom saw the altercation happen. Tom radioed, we have an incident, you know, on the radio, internal radio. He said, you know, basically call 911 or whatever. And so the ladies at the front desk hit our panic button. Okay. So you now have heard us say on multiple occasions since this last year, you know, we have installed significant security cameras on the exterior of this campus. This didn't happen a year ago. They were not here. We have spent significant investment on installing panic buttons at both front desks. And those panic buttons immediately dispatch emergency services. They lock down this building. Okay. The building cannot be accessed by our badges, meaning staff or your badges. And they close and lock most of the fire doors on this, not lock, they close most of the fire doors on campus, creating additional barriers for, let's say, a shooter, because you want as many barriers as possible. So they hit the panic buttons and they worked. So that set off the dispatch to 911 that we had a problem on this campus. Other people also called 911. Is Crystal here? Crystal, you called 911, okay? I'd like you to describe your interaction with 911, okay? I want you to hear what happened when Crystal called 911, because you may find yourself being the first person to witness an event. And we have told you as part of our trainings that you should call 911 if you're the first person that encounters this, right? Let me ask you all a question. How many of you know our address? So if you were in the pack and you saw me grab Crystal and pull a gun out and hold it to Crystal, and you decide I have to go to that phone and call 911, how would you dial? Would you hit 9 or would you just dial 911, or what would you do? Your cell phone? I mean, there's a phone on the wall there. You would just dial 911? Anybody know the answer to that? Jason, would you just dial 911? No, you would just dial 911. It's just a direct dial, okay? 911 pound? So anyway, you're just going to do 911 and send. But what address would you give them for this? If she said, what's your address for this room? Well, just for the street address. All right, so let's have Crystal on this microphone tell your interaction with 911 dispatch from yesterday.
Yeah, so
And where were you? So why don't you tell us what happened?
right. So when
A little closer and louder.
so when we received the crew message that we were in a hostage situation, we were told in the message that we needed to shelter in place, that we needed to be quiet, that we needed to barricade the room that we were in. We needed to turn off the lights and close the blinds. We needed to do all these steps because there was a hostage situation. So there was 6 of us in the office at that time, and we all jumped into action simultaneously, where we turned off the lights, we closed the blinds, we locked the doors, and we even barricaded it. So when we sheltered, we went into one of the offices, and I called 911. So when she called, she asked what was the nature of my emergency and the location, to which I said that we were in a drill and that we are experiencing a hostage situation. All this conversation that I was having with her, we were under the desk, and I was whispering the entire time so as not to be heard. So whenever she asked me what the location was, she asked how many people were with me or if I were alone. At that, there was 4 other people with me, and she asked what part of that building I was at as she located me, and she told me that she knew where I was. So I told her that I was in one of the main offices, and she said if I can be more specific. So I told her I was in the main entrance side, because the IL, most of the people know from coming here, the emergency services know that this is the main entrance. So I told her I was on the main entrance side in the offices behind the concierge desk. And she asked, do I know if emergency services were in the way, and can I see anything? And at that point I was under the desk, and I just told her that I couldn't see anything, and I couldn't see if any emergency personnel was there or not. So from there, she took my name, and she said that she has dispatched emergency services there and that they should be coming soon. So I asked her, how would I know if they are knocking or come to the door? How do I know how to respond if it's not the intruder? So she said that she got in touch with them, and that the police would identify himself by saying that he's part of the New Paltz Police, and he would say his name. And sure enough, the police officer did come, knock, say his name, and that he was part of the New Paltz Police, and he came in and ensured that we were okay.
So I'll take any questions on the 911 or the panic button process if anyone has anything. Okay, so important to that point. At this point, the panic button had already been pressed, so emergency services were already on their way. We knew that. But the 911 dispatcher still took Crystal's call. And we know other people also called 911, and they had set up a dummy 911 for the drill, and people had called that as well. So they will take as many calls as come in. So if you have to call, keep calling. We can't have too many, okay? But you can see they asked her lots of questions. So make sure you know where you are and can describe it, okay? Once that happened, the normal kind of response was set in motion. What was important about the drill, and the emergency team from the county and the planners did this the right way, right? So even though everybody was staged, were they at the firehouse or the police department still at this point? All the people, you don't know? No, like the ESU team and everything. While they were waiting, they were still at the police, right? So they're all still, all the officers are now still waiting at the police station, right? So they've made sure they don't have any live ammunition. They're all still waiting. They got dispatched in accordance with how long it really would have taken them to get dispatched, even though they were a minute away, right? So a couple got dispatched right away. Took them a few minutes to get here. But the SWAT team, the emergency services unit, which is the real tactical team that gathers, they're not just sitting somewhere. There's not just an emergency services team sitting somewhere in Ulster County. They're comprised of agents or personnel from all over the place, right? My husband was on this team. I mentioned that. Some of them are sleeping right now because they work nights. Some of them are office officers in Sullivan County. Some work up in Saugerties for, Saugerties Police Department. Some work as a school resource officer in Kingston, right? So even though yesterday the team was sitting at the New Paltz Police Department, they didn't dispatch them here yesterday 1 minute from when 911 got the call. They waited them there until how long their average response time would have taken them to all get to their staging area and accumulate. So they did not get here with their tactical vehicle, which was this huge armored vehicle that rolled up, until about 1:50. Okay, so you got my alert around 1:50 yesterday. That's Sarah alert, okay? Because that's around how long it would actually take the emergency services unit to accumulate enough people to an actual event in Ulster County. I want you to think about that because they come from all over the place. If you noticed when I sent that alert, how many of you got that one? The 1:50 alert. Notably, I only sent it to text on your phones and email. It did not ring on your landlines. It shouldn't have. And it didn't ring on other phones. So some of you probably didn't get it. I did that on purpose because we were trying to keep the campus quiet. We didn't want the phones going off all over the place. And I didn't want the phones ringing in the guest suite. So some of you said I didn't get those alerts because I don't carry my cell phone all the time. I don't look at texts. I don't have a cell phone. I don't look at email. So we need to think about that a little bit. This is one of the things on the list, right? So we're trying to keep the campus quiet. We don't want the phones ringing. What are some of the ways that we need to communicate some of this stuff? So the emergency services unit kind of, showed up and they were able to secure the hostage there. The team closed the perimeter of the campus, meaning they were able to secure that there was only one issue. And then eventually they were able to let the health center residents move about. Then we were able to let the residents in the kitchen, first the central and north wing, go back to their apartments. And then eventually we let the folks in the kitchen go to the classroom and the library area. And the negotiations between the New Paltz, it was New Paltz that did the negotiations. They took turns. So first, an officer from New Paltz began negotiating with the bad guy, and then Ulster County Sheriff's Department took a turn to negotiate with the bad guy. And this stuff is important because without these kinds of drills and exercises, they don't have an opportunity to do like a pretend negotiation. And I will tell you, this was videotaped and we were all there in the hallway. It was very expletive laden. That bad guy had a very bad mouth. And then it got delayed because he wanted a cigar and it was just a whole thing. So, it was going on and, it was, we did learn some, but any questions about that whole part of the process? Ina? Rob will take questions.
I understand we were fortunate yesterday, but what happens if a PERS goes off with crap hitting the fan?
I mean, during a drill or real life? Either or?
Yeah. So
Okay.
yesterday, so the New Paltz Rescue Squad and the fire department were, of course, on standby for this drill. And there were a couple of them, I think, located physically on campus, but they're always in quarters. And we have the ability to get those PERS alarms at our, we don't have to be at the front desk to get the alarms. So we have multiple ways that we can get the PERS alarms to us. We wouldn't necessarily get them at the desk, but we have a manager on duty all the time. But I guess if the manager on duty was incapacitated or, I guess worst case scenario, if nobody's at the desk, the manager on duty got shot. Jason's not Jasoning. I think Jason's microchipped.
Even
for
if
it.
he's Jason shot, he's still responding. He's not stopping. But even in this scenario, like Crystal's example, when Crystal called 911 yesterday and we were in the middle of whatever, Crystal, we had it in place that we had a select number that we were using to call instead of 911 here. Crystal didn't know that. So when she called 911, all the controllers, the auditors, they went, okay, we're pausing because we have a real life call. So if anyone had called yesterday with the real life, we actually paused the scenario for a few minutes while Crystal was on the phone because we weren't sure what was going on. So we waited. Then once we realized, okay, she's doing this part of the drill, we unpaused it and then went back. So that all worked actually effectively because of Crystal, not Tom.
Well, so we know that the technology for the PERS alarms in independent living also appears on the computers at reception.
Correct.
So the capability to be seen and heard at reception happens at both desks. We know it also can go on any phone we want it to. So we will think about that and let you know.
But then technically, doesn't reception then call the apartment or wherever the person is going off? So if you're trying to be quiet, there's a phone ringing.
Well, I mean, yes, but in the event of an emergency, you can't control everything. You're trying to mitigate risks, not eliminate risk.
Understood. I'll explain later, but I have a reason.
Well, you can explain it now, unless you're
No,
embarrassed.
I mean, no, not at all. But as you know, I had to deal with emergency the other night.
Yeah.
We happen to have 2 EMS people who had never been downstairs on 2 North. They couldn't figure out. We went in the elevator. We went to 1. We went back to 2. Then we went. I kept going. It's 3. And they couldn't understand. They couldn't find the elevator to 238 to come down there. And the police officer had taken the stairs up. We were in the elevator. It was like a comedy of errors. And the whole night was a comedy of errors, but it was just one of those things.
All right. So all of the wayfinding is on the list. Yes. And so that's another justification of why we do the things that we're doing like this. So excellent point. And we will add what's the best way for us to get redundancy on getting PERS alerts out in a situation like this, because that kind of thing absolutely can happen. You can go ahead and describe that, because I still don't totally understand exactly what happened.
So one of the things that they wanted to practice was secondary to the hostage situation that was happening, that there was an actual, as part of the drill, 911 call for someone who was injured and unresponsive. And so while the hostage situation was going on, there was also this response to somebody who was in one of the mechanical rooms. The dummy was Rescue Randy. That's who they had to rescue. And so that was all happening in the background so that they could practice, EMS could practice that drill, retrieving somebody who's injured while there's this hostage situation going on. So they actually drilled for that and practiced it.
We wanted that inserted, one, to give EMS something to treat, not for EMS just to stand around and wait for something to happen. We wanted something to happen midterm so EMS would have something to do. All right. So that's what, Mike and Joe really wanted to implement for their training. And like Ina said, a lot of their EMS staff are extremely young, or they've never been here before. So they're experiencing the same thing that the police have or the sheriffs have. A lot of new staff are coming on, and they're really young faces. So they've got to learn the building just like everyone else does. And that's the reason we injected that into that piece, so we could address that.
And the other thing too is it was right near the area. So let's say there was a resident who poorly reacted to that of what happened next to the guest suite. Rescue Randy was found nearby, and the SWAT team, who was primarily responsible for the response right outside of the hostage barricade, the SWAT team basically already knew, because of their training that they have that's quite extensive, which member of the SWAT team was to attend to that resident who had fallen, and two of them had taken Rescue Randy, who needed to be downstairs, and 2 EMS. So that was actually one of the very positive notes that I observed myself yesterday. And it was definitely reassuring to see that.
Yeah, it was their job to clear every room. What was a garbage room not locked, or a locked closet? That means they've got to come down to here to one of us, get a key and get access to all the locked doors, because everyone's sheltered in place and they're trying to clear the area. So that's why we staged that dummy in that closet for
All
them
right, we're
as well.
going to take a question from Jean, then from Lionel, and then I want to talk about a couple more things, and then we're going to break at
Okay, so
2:25.
Your drill yesterday, it was like anybody could have walked in and passed. But if you have an active shooter, the first person he's going to get to is either the front door has got to react. In other words, anybody could have got past. He knew where his girlfriend was, so he went there and he was going to find her. You have an active shooter, the first they're going to come into contact with your concierge. They're going to break a window. In other words, it's more of an emergency than you kind of did yesterday.
Well, yeah, I mean, yesterday was a drill. If we have an active shooter, they're going to come in and do what they want to do. And I mean, we've always talked about the fact that none of us feel like this campus should be a gated community. It shouldn't be a lockdown facility. Nobody wants this to be a fortress. And we've gotten through 14 years of not having incidents. We're trying to mitigate risks, not eliminate risks. Nobody here wants to be in a lockdown facility. But we're doing a great job. But Rolf, go ahead, and then we're going to have Lionel, and then I want to move on to the next topic. Go ahead, Rolf.
I've got an observation to make, and then I got a question. Observation is, if you're going to be putting the sign or putting new signs up there, also put a floor plan up there. So with a red X is where the guy is who's looking at this map, he can then figure out, oh, I'm at this corner of the building. If he just looks at a signage sign up there, he has no idea where in the building he is. So this would give him an idea. I've got to go left and right or whatever it is. All right.
Like you are here.
Secondly, and Ned, I've got a question about the fire doors. I keep hearing they lock, they don't lock. If there's a real fire here, push my way through those.
They're not locked. I shouldn't have said locked. They can never be locked by code.
So can I push my way through there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just closed.
Okay.
Yeah, they can never be locked
I'm
by
saying they're
code.
draft control and that kind of business.
What's that?
They're more draft control. Fire
They're
can get
yeah,
through.
they're I don't know, they're called draft control, but they're just closed to prevent fire from coming through.
No.
They're prevent fire from coming
I
through.
understand
It creates a smoke and fire compartment. Yes. Mhm.
To the problem of the emergency service people not being able to find rooms, could it be possible that periodically each of the services, fire department, police department, ambulance people, have their new people come here for a tour to show them where everything is and explain the idiosyncrasies of the flooring system?
I mean, certainly they can. They're certainly welcome to do so. I just want to be clear. They found 461. The best thing is to make sure that it's kind of like you can either teach a man to fish or you can always feed him. You know, we want to teach them how to find their way. So what are the easiest and most effective ways to teach them how to get around the building, right? So we learned things yesterday, or the best ways to help people find their ways around the building. So we're working on it. All right, I want to talk about a couple of things that we found, I think, probably resident centric, which is really important. And I want to just talk about that for a couple of minutes. We definitely had some residents yesterday that either missed the memo about what was going on, even as the event was going on, which was really concerning. And we will be speaking with those residents and their families, really like in the immediate period. We had a couple of residents that, were literally standing in the midst of emergency personnel, like, you know, not just like walking where the hallways were empty and getting a cup of coffee, because we had that happening too, but really just standing at the front door with surrounded by emergency personnel, like, I'm a resident, I want to come in. And so some of those concerns, and we will be addressing that because that was very concerning. We had some residents that didn't get the communication, and we will be following up on that because that's an easy fix. I think probably my bigger concern, and I think some of this was it's a drill, I'm not worried, kind of a lackadaisical moving from point A to point B when we found out we were starting, I'm eating my lunch, that kind of thing. Just emphasizing the fact that when we're doing this, it can be a life or death situation. Okay. We got to move with a little bit of urgency here, and your lunch can wait. It can really be a matter of saving 25 people or saving 26 people. And that 26th person is just as important as the 25th person. You know, your lunch can seriously wait. So if our staff are telling you get in the kitchen, it's not to be a jerk. It's because we love every single one of you, and we're doing these kinds of things, and Cameron and Rob and Bridget, and we are doing these kinds of things. It's not because we're trying to be controlling. It's because if we can learn one thing to save 26 people instead of 25, it's because we don't get anything out of this. We didn't get grant money from this. We're not getting, an award for this. This was, a lot of work, a lot of, missed sleep, a lot of work, like actual work that didn't get done. We're doing this to try to save lives and to try to mitigate loss in the event that something happens. We hope that we don't ever have an issue like this, but we want to be prepared. We didn't have the opportunity to prepare for COVID, right? But I think that if it was to ever happen again, or something like that happens again, we're more prepared now because we went through it, and we've learned some things and we've gotten better. And we do really appreciate everything that everyone has done. And I know I'm just reiterating that. We are going to be issuing a survey for all of you to fill out. You can choose to or not choose to, but if you have questions, recommendations, thoughts, please do give us your thoughts on this. And yes, Carl, to your point, we will be doing more drills, whether they'll be with law enforcement. Cameron won't be here, unfortunately, so we'll have to find another sucker to put in all that effort. Another young buck that has that much energy. It won't be me, I'll tell you that. But would I love to do it again in 12 or 24 months and see how they feel about it? I think it's valuable. I do. You may not all agree with that. I know it's 3 hours out of your life. But listen, we made it through 3 weeks of filming last year and we all survived.
And just to interject, the county also too learned a lot. I mean, Jen was here as an observer, Jen Metzger, county executive. We had a legislature also in my group observing. So just they learned a lot because they've never seen their teams work. This is what the first drill, Mike said, like even since before COVID, like they haven't done a drill this size. Guys, that's a lot of years for them to not go through these drills. So they learned a lot and they got to observe what all these police officers have to go through. So it was really helpful.
How did they think we did, do you think? We'll find out, Jean, we'll find out next Thursday when we have our hot wash. I think generally speaking, everybody thinks it went well. I don't think...
I agree. I think law enforcement and for us, everything went really well.
Speaking from a management perspective, each unit must go back, review their own problems.
Correct.
Then there are interfaces with other groups. That's a very critical process that must be completed in order to make this successful. Who's in charge of that total process?
Mike Madison, who's kind of been in charge of us, Cameron can order this, but that's one of their challenges they have is getting all these entities after he does all these drills, like Michelle said, who's in charge? Getting these entities to fix those little tiny problems have. But Mike Madison, what's his title again? Ulster County Emergency Deputy Director of Emergency Services. He's kind of overseeing all of this. He oversaw Cameron and I, the planning and all that other stuff. So
right from the beginning of this, about a year ago, this entire plan was kind of laid out. So about a year ago, we forecasted all of this planning from the start until the end. And just because the exercise was yesterday doesn't mean that it's the end. So I just want to make that clear. Obviously, we've spoke of different things today that we're looking to implement in Woodland Pond. But ultimately, there's a bunch of different steps, and exactly what you just said, Ted, is correct. We had yesterday's exercise. Today, we had an internal hot wash for the leadership of Woodland Pond. Throughout this process, will be working with Mike to compile all that information from our residents, from our staff, from our leadership, to then go back to him. He's receiving feedback from his staff. He's receiving feedback from New Paltz and EMS and fire and all of those other agencies that were involved yesterday. So basically what we're doing together is to compile all that information to then bring back to each agency to identify what the pros and the cons and the successes and the failures were, to then grow not only as individual agencies, but to grow together. So next week, we'll be having a hot wash for the planning team and our executive team, where each of our departments are able to come forth with their concerns so everybody can get things laid out on the table. And then after that, we have a whole slew of different materials and information that we've prepared within this past year that Woodland Pond can then use to grow and have those other exercises and, learn from what happened. So that's the goal of yesterday. That's what was intended to happen. It wasn't just to disrupt everybody's day. It was to get material out of it to use it as a resource.
Just to follow on with Jean's comment about I was a member of the Club 55 that enjoyed kitchen duty, but really I should have a reunion, but to pass on, every resident should take note. Every one of the staff fully understood what their role was, what they had to do, and they very kindly and quietly shepherded us in and asked us to do things. Pay attention to the staff. Jean, I'm sorry. My turn. Thank you. The other thing also is I've heard feedback when we were doing the active shooters, Rob's staff were cleaning an apartment. They immediately went in and put the blinds down, locked the door, and she said, "What are you doing?" She said, "We have an active shooter. We're under, an event." So put in your list the positiveness of having a well-trained, appreciative staff. They were terrific.
Yeah.
And my second point is I'm going to add one more echelon or chevron to the Why Not Award. Why not do this again? But really, the staff was fantastic. Residents should listen to them. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that throughout this whole process, staff have been tremendous. I mean, yesterday it was so refreshing to see most of the staff, especially those frontline staff, to react the way that they did. And, we're grateful for that.
Okay, Joe, Maddie, and then we're going to wrap up.
I was out and about in the morning a lot and went back to my apartment just before all hell broke loose. But it was a very useful thing. Knowing that this was happening when I was in the pool in the morning, I thought, if this happens when I'm in here, what am I going to do? And I thought, all right, there's a dressing room. I didn't know there was a lock on the door. I thought, okay, barricade the door. There's nothing heavy in there. What am I going to do? And I thought, okay, there are a couple of chairs. I'll get the fattest people and sit them in the chairs. So this is by way of saying that this exercise has had extra benefits just as a thought experiment aside from the actual implementation of the thing, you're in a place and you think about it and you say, well, what would I do? And that's a useful exercise.
Right. And that was the main goal, is to get everyone thinking, what would you do? That's really all we're trying to do and get across to everybody. What would you do if this happens? You know, whether Tom hammers home fire, what are you doing? If there's an active shooter, what are you doing? You know, think about those things. I know they're not average day things that you normally think about, but this is kind of the world we live in here, you know, so just think about those things.
Maddie, and then we will say goodbye.
Well, I don't want to be death's head at the feast here, but if you were looking carefully yesterday and this wonderful announcement comes that you can get lunch half price, it tells you when the drill's going to be. I mean, why else were you going to have everybody have half? So I didn't go to lunch, as Joe will tell you. I was supposed to have lunch with her. I mean,
right. That we need to get people out.
I know, but you could have done it a couple of days before. Well, I mean, just, I don't know how many other people.
Right. It was
Ghost town. We didn't have any people. Well, nobody heeded our please come and act like your normal selves. No one was acting like their normal selves.
right. Everyone had disappeared.
Right.
So we needed something. Next time it'll be free booze or something. We didn't have enough cold ones for the free drinks, but next time. Go ahead, Rolf.
There are many places in the basement which you cannot get cell phone. How, as a person who's wandering around down there, how's he supposed to know the alarm has gone off? Can't put a light up there and say evacuate.
Well, if it's a fire, you would see it, and it just say if it's a fire, for an example, Rolf, like you're going to see the strobe lights in the basement. But if it's like an active shooter, like yesterday or something like that, there is no notification right now for that. So that's something we need to work on internally. Right. If you see, there's plenty of staff members down there that would have radios that would know what's going on. My staff, Tom's staff are all down there.
We're looking at all this stuff. So any last things or forever hold your peace? All right. Mr. Wagner.
One more.
And everyone's going to hold their peace until the survey. Then you can put as much peace in there as you want.
When you're doing your hot wash, what's the protocol, the accepted reaction if I see the perpetrator running down the hall and I've led a good life, so I attack him? Well,
I mean, that's your choice. That there's no protocol. Woodland Pond's not going to tell you what you need to do in that situation. Tom did his own protocol yesterday when he saw the perpetrator. He followed the guy for no good. Didn't work. Tom's still here. The guy still got away. And Tom's led a good life, but the guy still got away. That guy was more motivated than Tom was. I think we've all sort of thought about that, especially since 9/11, right? We've all thought about, if I was the person on the plane and saw those people, what would I do, right? I can't tell you, John. I think that's between you and your maker. His wife. I think you have to ask Jill that question. That's right. And on that note, toodles.